Imagine the year 1952 as a crackling cathedral of invisible waves where every farmhouse radio in America glowed like a hearth and William Conrad's gravel-gargling voice poured out of the speaker like molten justice, turning the simple act of turning a dial into a weekly pilgrimage to Dodge City, Kansas, where the wind tasted like gunpowder and every shadow hit a hanging offense. And for 9 straight years, the entire nation held its breath every Monday night because Marshal Matt Dillon was out. There's somewhere in the dark, taller than sin, wider than mercy, cleaning up the frontier one corpse at a time with nothing but a badge, a Colt, and a moral code carved on tablets even Moses would have respected. Then September 10th, 1955, happened, and television cracked open like the firmament on the seventh day because CBS took that radio legend, dipped it in Technicolor dreams and black and white reality, and handed it to a 6'7" Minnesota farm boy named James Arness, who looked like God, had personally whittled him out of an oak tree and sent him west to remind humanity that good could still draw faster than evil. For the next 20 years, Gunsmoke wasn't a TV show. It was the national nervous system, 635 episodes that wired themselves directly into the American soul. Every Saturday night at 10 p.m. sharp, the country went into cardiac arrest of anticipation. Mothers yanked pot roasts out of ovens half-cooked. Fathers killed the engine in the driveway and left the groceries melting in the trunk. Kids were dragged dripping from bathtubs with shampoo still in their hair because nothing on God's green earth was more important than watching Matt Dillon stride down Front Street with that deliberate limp that wasn't acting, but Anzio shrapnel still chewing on his bones like a dog that never learned the war was over. Half-hour bursts of righteousness from 55 to 61 that exploded into hour-long sermons when viewers threatened to storm CBS with pitchforks and TV antennas if they didn't get more time in Dodge. 20 seasons of frontier gospel that collected 15 Emmys like notches on a gun belt, turned living rooms into confessionals where grandpas whispered, "Get out of Dodge," every time the mother-in-law came to visit, turned school playgrounds into mini Dodge cities where every kid practiced Matt's 1,000-yard stare until they could make the bully hand over his lunch money without a word, turned the phrase itself into a permanent resident of the English language, from Brooklyn bar fights to Saigon bunkers to Silicon Valley boardrooms where executives still bark, "Get out of Dodge," when the stock drops 10 points. Dell Comics slapped Matt on the racks next to Batman. British newspapers ran gun law strips daily like it was the King James Bible in 10-gallon panels. The show birthed more future legends than a Hollywood stork on steroids. Harrison Ford hauled lumber in '72 before he hauled the Millennium Falcon. Jodie Foster picked pockets at age 10 before she picked up 2 Oscars. Leonard Nimoy scowled under a Stetson before he lived long and prospered. William Shatner overacted in Spurs before he overacted in space. DeForest Kelley patched up cowboys before he patched up Kirk. James Doohan fixed wagons before he fixed warp drives. Even Jerry Goldsmith scribbled the Gunsmoke theme before he launched the Enterprise into the final frontier with 8 notes that still make grown men tear up. When Gilligan's Island dared climb the ratings, the CBS chairman's wife came storming back from Palm Springs like an avenging angel in a mink stole, slammed her martini on the mahogany desk, and told the network, "You will not cancel my Marshal Dillon, or I will cancel you." So they axed the castaways instead because nobody tells Mrs. William S. Paley her favorite lawman is riding off into the sunset without her permission. Behind the myth was a battlefield of blood, sweat, and residuals. John Wayne himself, the Duke, the reason Arness even got the part because Wayne turned it down flat, told CBS, "I ain't leaving the big screen for your little box, but I got a kid under contract who's 7 feet of quiet thunder. Give it to him or I'll rope you to a cactus." Then rode off to win Oscars while Arness almost said no because some cigar-chomping suit whispered, "TV will bury your movie career faster than a shallow grave in Boot Hill." Thank the Lord and all the saints he told that suit to. Shove it. Amanda Blake became Miss Kitty only because Polly Bond thought getting paid more than her little rascal's husband would make the Pope file for divorce. Dennis Weaver invented Chester's limp from a college buddy who walked like he had one leg in a gopher hole and spent the next 20 years apologizing because little old ladies sent fruit baskets and crutches to the studio thinking he'd been mauled by a grizzly. Milburn Stone spent 3 seasons wanting to strangle Arness for showing up late, hungover, and clowning around like a rodeo reject until one day on set he cornered the giant Marshal and snarled, "Next time you're late, I'll explain where you were and where I went when I killed you." And Arness looked down from his 7-foot cloud, smiled like a saint who'd just found religion, and said, "You're right, Doc, I needed that." And from that second on they were brothers forged in the hottest fires of frontier respect. Arness himself limped for real, shrapnel from Anzio still, grinding in his legs like a German souvenir that never learned the war ended. Crew shot all walking scenes at 5 a.m. before the pain woke up, built fake hitching posts that were really chairs so the tallest marshal in history could rest without the camera catching it, used stunt doubles to mount horses because some days his legs simply refused to fold into the saddle, yet he never complained, never broke character, never let America see the strongest man on television wince because Matt Dillon didn't wince, and neither would James Arness. Not for 20 years, not for 635 episodes, not for one single second of screen time. And then, after 2 decades of turning Saturday nights into sacred ground, after turning living rooms into cathedrals where the only hymn was the opening guitar riff that sounded like God clearing his throat, after turning a nation of 50 million into a congregation that genuflected every time Matt tipped his hat, CBS canceled it like they were taking out Wednesday's garbage. No warning, no farewell, no nothing. The cast found out from TV Guide while still in costume. Arness staring at the paper like it had just shot Kitty. Milburn Stone throwing his script across the set hard enough to knock over a fake tombstone. Amanda Blake crying so hard her mascara ran like the Cimarron after a flash flood. The final episode, the sharecroppers, barely mentioning Matt. Just Festus bumbling through a cornfield like the greatest Western ever made. Deserved a sitcom reject for an obituary while the marshal who carried a nation on his shoulders for 20 years didn't even get a close-up. Fans lost their minds, wrote letters in blood-red ink, threatened to burn CBS headquarters to the ground with their Zenith consoles, picketed in 10-gallon hats and 6-shooters made of cardboard and rage, sent so many telegrams the Western Union office in Dodge City, Kansas, had to hire extra staff just to handle the grief. So 19 years later, the network crawled back on their knees with 5 TV movies like peace offerings wrapped in barbed wire and regret. The last one man's justice in 94 where an older, grayer Dillon with eyes that had seen every kind of hell and still chose heaven rides back into the fight one final time to keep a kid from repeating every mistake he ever made. Mentors him with the kind of quiet wisdom that only comes from burying too many friends and digging too many graves. The climax comes like a thunderclap in a cathedral. No swelling orchestra, no slow motion, no tears, just Dillon facing down Josh Reardon while every young gun around him freezes like statues in a hailstorm. Arness lifts that long-barreled Colt with hands that shook from real war wounds and 70 years of carrying America's conscience, squeezes off one perfect shot that rings out like the closing bell of history. Villain drops like a sack of sin, and Matt turns to the camera with the same calm that tamed a continent. Dust swirling around his boots like the ghosts of every outlaw he ever buried, and says 3 words that closed 40 years of American mythology. I got him. No speeches, no swelling music, just the sound of a hammer falling on the final nail in the coffin of the Old West. Cut to black. Roll credits. And somewhere across the country, 50 million grown men who hadn't cried since their fathers died felt something wet on their cheeks because they weren't just watching a marshal hang up his badge. They were watching their childhood, their fathers, their country. Their belief that good could still draw faster than evil ride off into the blood-red sunset and never come back. December 2024 Gunsmoke hit streaming and shot straight into the top 10 like Matt himself had drawn on Netflix. Outdrew Yellowstone, outgunned The Mandalorian, outrated every shiny new wannabe because some legends don't fade. They reload. Because every time a kid in 2025 discovers Dodge City and hears that opening guitar riff that still sounds like God clearing his throat, Matt Dillon puts the badge back on. James Arness stands a little taller on legs that still hurt from 1944. Doc Adams grumbles one more diagnosis. Miss Kitty pours one more whiskey. Chester limps back into frame complaining about his bursitis. Festus hollers about his mule Ruth. And America remembers that once upon a time justice wasn't a debate. It wasn't a committee. It wasn't a hashtag. It was a man 7 feet tall walking down Front Street with the sunset in his eyes, the weight of a nation on his shoulders, and the unshakable certainty that right would always, always draw first. And no matter how many years pass, no matter how many new shows try to fill the saddle, no matter how many streaming services rise and fall like stagecoach robberies, there's only one Marshall, only one Dodge, only one goodbye that still echoes like a single gunshot across the prairie that time forgot. I got him. And the West, the real West, the one we all carry in our hearts like a bullet we're too proud to dig out, finally, mercifully, rides into the blood. Red sunset at peace, spurs jingling like church bells, Colt still smoking, badge still shining, legend still alive. Because some men don't die. They just ride on until the next kid turns on the TV and needs someone to show them what justice looks like when it's 7 feet tall and wearing a 10-gallon hat.